Board games, board games, it's what we're talking about. Board games, but I'm not gonna shout. Again, Jess Metheringham and I are together, and we will talk about the Kickstarter and what it's like to have a Kickstarter when it ends. If you are just too stressed to enjoy the company of your friends, if you feel like you just need to be all alone in your home doing this and that and maybe not on the phone because why are you phoning me? Come on, this is inappropriate. I need to get off back to my Kickstarter. Come on, wait a bit. Kickstarters, and when they finish, it's what we're talking about. Kickstarters that are finishing up. I'm not gonna shout. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good whatever it is, wherever you are. I am Bez. It is 10 a.m. UK time for Bezzy Beats and Board Game Blather. And as you know, it is Jess Metheringham who is going to become a regular guest. We're going to be discussing something that we're working on together, like maybe sometimes focusing a bit more on what's going on in your life, sometimes focusing a bit more what's going on in my life. But thank you for joining me, Jess.
Hey, it's lovely to be here. It's lovely to see you again. Hello.
Hello, and hello, Rob. It is lovely to see you. And
Hey,
we are,
Rob.
of course, I imagine that there's one thing that's really on your mind. So I'm going to let you introduce the topic.
The thing that's really on my mind more than anything else right now is the Kickstarter. So Labyrinth has 35 hours to go. Yes, that would be right now. So basically, Labyrinth will finish 10 p.m. UK time tomorrow, which is the end of the month, and it's that last stretch, and it's just watching those things go up, looking at how it's going to go. It's all a little bit nerve-wracking at the moment. But basically we're at 927 backers. My current sort of stretch goal for myself at the moment was to get 1,000 backers, because I reckon that's that may well be possible. So let's stretch to get 1,000 backers.
I
But
think it's if I had to pick a number right now, like if I had to pick a number, I think 1002. That's what I'm going to guess.
1002. Well, that would be absolutely lovely. That would just be nice, because it would just nudge it into that, to that next category. 4 figures of backers. Oh, it would be great.
Hello,
Hi,
Jess.
Josie.
Josie. It's lovely to see you in Finchy Finch. And hello, Tonga lad, Ian. It's amazing, like all the people from Aircon, except for
Hey.
Rob, who I don't think was.
No, I
Rob
don't think
was.
Rob was at Aircon.
No, Rob wasn't. But, Rob was there in spirit. I thought about Rob at least one of the days. I'm sure I mentioned Rob's name at some point.
See, I think I have met Rob in person once.
Rob's got very flamboyant shirts. They're like
It's
you could
possible
call
that I
them Hawaiian
haven't met
shirts, but
Rob
they're
in
not
person.
really Hawaiian shirts. They're just excellent shirts.
But he wasn't at Aircon. But Rob,
No.
tell me in the comments whether we've actually met or not, because I think we might have met at Games Expo last year, but I'm not 100% sure. Games Expo was a long time ago.
I mean, less than a year, and it's only
Less
going
than
to
a
be. I
year.
think. Wow, I think it is actually going to be less than 8 weeks until UK Games Expo. I really need to pull
Oh my
my
goodness.
finger out, proverbially speaking, and I need to
I
get
do as
my
well.
post-convention survey sent off to the people who helped me at Aircon, and then I need to make a new survey for UK Games Expo and check and try to start getting people together for that. Rob says that you did meet briefly at UK Games Expo. You couldn't chat for very long. Other states are available. I'm not sure what you mean. 8 weeks. Yeah, I think that's about correct. And
Yeah, that sounds
so,
about
yes,
right.
as Jess said, we are talking about Kickstarter. We're talking about the final days. And look, I've been pretty busy. I've been under a lot of pressure recently. But what I thought we could do is talk about what you might want to do. I mean, should is a strong word, but what you might expect, what's likely to happen towards the end, and also what you might be feeling internally. So it's kind of, those are the three broad questions that I put down there. Like,
Sounds
what's
good.
likely to happen, how you can maybe facilitate a better outcome, what you can do to capitalize on the end, and how you might feel. But I mean, unless you have anything that you feel the need to get out right now, let's talk about recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights, recent highlights, playing games and other delights, recent highlights. So yesterday, I did have a bit of a walk. I did do a few pages of writing. I wrote down about a first. I'm not even going to call it a first draft. It kind of is, but it's not a first draft that I would even show the committee to show. Yes, I've done the first draft. It's but it's the absolute version 0.1. But it's there for 3 characters out of 10. So I've done 30% of it. I was hoping to take today off. I was hoping to get the bulk of it done yesterday so I could have today off. But I think that I'm just right now better off working a few days and then maybe allowing myself to take the afternoon off, because for whatever reason, and again, this is not something that used to happen to me before I caught COVID, but I was just doing some writing. I went for a walk. I had these thoughts. I came back. I typed up the thoughts, and then I just got exhausted by doing the writing. And then after a few hours, that was me spent for the entire day, which I don't understand it. I just did not have any energy or anything, and I just felt incredibly down on myself. I did also find out that GameFound is now kind of public, so
Yes,
anyone
it's out of
can get
beta,
to
isn't it?
Kickstarter. So there's basically 5 requirements. So firstly, your project needs to be board game or board game related. Secondly, you need to have photo ID. For full disclosure, I do not currently have photo ID, so I could make a Kickstarter because my credentials already there. I could not make a GameFound thing, maybe into once I could. Thirdly, you need to be one of many different countries. We are lucky that we live in the UK. I'm sure there's some countries where people are potentially watching this. And obviously, you need to have access to a computer. I didn't even bother. But fourthly, you need to actually, that's what it is, be able to fill in the forms. You need to have access to image making stuff and put in the image. If you want stretch goals, you have to actually make images. So it is a little bit more in-depth than the Kickstarter stuff, because you actually need to do a bit more content creation, so to speak. And then fifth, they run a check. And it's not super clear on how this human check works. And I would love to have a conversation with them, because that's going to be a really subjective line. And I think that where that line should be drawn is going to be in question, because if it's too strict, then, you wouldn't have had stuff like what I made in 2014, back when I was making the game that would now become Yogi. I try to not talk about Cinnabines without introducing it as Yogi these days, because Yogi is the name that I want people to remember. Don't buy the original, because Yogi is actually available. Anyway, so the point is that if you're too strict, you won't be able to have these fun new things like Disarm the Base, but if you're too lenient, then you might have people who don't get their projects, and that's going to be a question for them. How do you draw that balance? But that would be a really interesting discussion.
That definitely would be. But for another day, I think. But I mean, that will be interesting because I think we'll be thinking about whether for future projects we go across to GameFound. There are a couple more smallish things I'd like to do. A few more of the cards like these. So I've been thinking about what sort of cards I want to do next. Thinking as well about whether some of them could become small physical games. So this Hearts one, for example, which is a 2-player version of the Roll and Colour. Now I've been thinking about doing a version which is circles and which has little wooden pieces that you put on, because then that also, that further restricts the colors you can use, because you only have a certain number of the pieces, so I've been thinking, wouldn't that be nice if you had little wooden pieces and perhaps a cloth board, a tablecloth, not tablecloth, a tea towel sort of style board, and thinking, that would actually be a really nice little bundle of a game. But again, but that might be something that we take to GameFound rather than Kickstarter. We'll have to see.
And I agree with Rob, who says it'll be interesting to see how the future pans out. Hello, Adam from Die Rolling, who says GameFound versus Kickstarter. What's the difference? I honestly don't know. They are both crowdfunding platforms. There's minor differences. I mean, it would take too long to get into every little difference, but some people get annoyed by the fact that when GameFound sends out an update, you need to click the email to then read the full thing. It doesn't actually get delivered into your email box. Some people don't like the navigation system of one, or don't like the fact that GameFound doesn't have an app. Some people don't like the fact that Kickstarter has mentioned that it might be going into NFT technology. And honestly, for me, the reasons to support GameFound are firstly that environmental concerns, if those announcements actually pan out, and secondly, wanting to support an upstart. The big benefit for Kickstarter is that it's something that people are already familiar with. It's something where people already have an account. And at this point, I would like people to type in their guess, if they've not already read my Twitter thread, what percentage of backers of my previous campaign do you think came from Kickstarter? So there were a lot of tags, a lot of them came from Twitter, a lot of them came from Facebook, some of them came from an email that I sent out, but from Kickstarter, some of them were emailed by Kickstarter when I launched, because Kickstarter sends out an automatic email. Folk get emailed when their friends back something. Sometimes they see it recommended. Sometimes they see it on the page, like just the Discover projects. What percentage of my 288 backers do you feel came from Kickstarter? So I would came from Kickstarter. What percentage of people came from Kickstarter? I would really like to hear. But before we go into those numbers, Rob says GameFound is implementing loads of the features that creators have been calling for on Kickstarter. Yes, absolutely. They are talking about helping us with that. They are talking to us about other things. Adam says tea towel boards are great. Dragoon is lovely. Yes, Dragoon has one. Josie says Kickstarter is already established, and I quite like having everything in one place. So the question from me to you, Jess, what percentage of my 288 backers?
What percentage of your 288 backers came from Kickstarter? I assume that you're referring to the little graph that you get on the dashboard that says, how much of them,
no,
pledged
not
via...
exactly. I went in and I added up the little numbers. So I actually spent about 5 minutes doing this. And it was like, okay, 1 from this thing, 2 from that thing. And then I actually spent a good 5 minutes doing this work.
So you're not counting. So are you counting the watch it launched email that goes out? When
yes.
Okay.
Because that was sent out by Kickstarter.
Yeah. I am going to go for 55%.
55%. Okay, so Rob, do you want to chime in with a guess? So you can say, do you think it was higher or lower than 55%? I'll just make it easier for you. So Finchy Finch says 6%. It was more than that, I will tell you that. Die Rolling guesses 15%. It was more than that. And Rob, Rob's guess is 30%. Well, Rob, it was more than that. And Jess guessed 55%. It was actually 64%. It was 184 backers out of 288. I was expecting it to be about 40%. Before I counted it up, and let's be honest, Kickstarter, it's in their interest to inflate those numbers, obviously.
Mhm.
And let's also be honest, if someone sees it on my page,
Mhm.
on my Facebook page, and then clicks through, but the number of people who came from a direct link, that was less than 10. So that would account for less than 10%. And so the total number was 64%.
So, Bez, do you want to do the opposite exercise then? So clearly my Kickstarter hasn't finished yet, but do you want to have a guess at how many on Library Labyrinth? Now, this is me just looking at the little graph. There's a little pie chart on the side that they show, so it's a slightly rougher calculation than you've done. But this is the pledged via Kickstarter versus pledged via external referrers versus pledged via custom referrers. Now, I'll tell you for free that custom referrers is less than 1% on this little graph, though there are some on there. But do you want to try and guess right at this moment what Library Labyrinth looks like?
Okay, die rolling guesses that yours is going to be lower. I would also guess that yours is going to be lower. I was thinking somewhere around the 50s. I'm going to guess. I'm going to be really horrible and guess 54%. But anyone else can come in and
Anyone
go like
else? Any
53
other
or whatever.
suggestions? Rob, Josie.
So Rob and Josie have to come in and pip it. So do you think it's more than 55? Do you think it's less than 54? And Rob says 53. Okay. Yep, I was expecting that. And so maybe you can talk. And Josie says
Ooh.
45. Oh, that's very confident.
So there was actually a reason I asked this question, and it is because the percentage on that little chart is 64%. So it's exactly the same as yours.
Interesting.
Yeah. Which is why when you said it, I thought, oh, hang on, that's what I'm looking at right now. So that's fascinating.
And I would have expected yours to be a bit higher because I did get the impression that your external marketing was a bit better than mine.
This has changed quite a bit over the over the last few days. This has changed, and in fact, at the start, then we had a far lower percentage. I think actually right at the start, I think the numbers pledged via Kickstarter was probably slightly below 50%. But over the last week or so, then it's really climbed, and I think it's because people, like you say, there are people who have been they've been notified of the other pledges. There are people who also have they've come in through something and then they've clicked the remind me later button, and then that probably is what's pushing it up now.
I got less than 10 for the remind me later notifications, which I thought was interesting. When you talk about your friends backing, I think that's also really interesting. I don't personally get emails from Kickstarter currently, but lots of people do, and maybe they've seen it on Facebook, they thought, oh, I should back that, but then they don't. And then later on, they get, oh, my friend backed that. Oh, yeah, that's almost finishing. So it's not the thing that gets them to back necessarily. It's not the initial provocation, but it is still the thing that tips them over the edge.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
I think with Itch, let's talk about Itch for literally just 2 seconds. Well, no, literally about 30 seconds. Yesterday, there were at least 3 bundles that I would have liked to support because for like 10 quid, you get a whole bucket load of games. And I go in and I'm like, oh, I don't have an Itch account. Well, I do have an Itch account, but I can't remember the login. And I know it's going to take me a good amount of effort to be like, okay, I forgot that. What's my email that's actually registered with Itch? Because I've got multiple emails, and then I've got to remember that, and then I've got to change it, and then it's not letting me sign in easily. And so at that point, I just be like, okay, maybe I'll do it later. But if I put it off and I'm talking about it now, maybe I'll do it today, maybe I won't. But if I got an email, maybe that would have tipped me over the edge. And I think it's really important that you get these little things. And people say, oh, it's not that much work to go to GameFound. And it isn't, but every barrier is another barrier.
Yeah.
And I could not, and if we are looking at 64% of people coming in from Kickstarter being tipped over the edge, that is really interesting, yes.
Yes, it's that thing where it's, small hurdles, many small hurdles can actually prevent people from getting there. So each hurdle is, might be a very small one, but it's only, but put them together and people are just like, oh, well, I'll do it later. And then they forget about it, but it's the same, that having that extra little nudge, all of the little nudges combine and then people go, oh, yeah, well, yeah, maybe I should actually do that. There's someone who's just commented,
And
for
thank
example,
you,
now on
Ian,
Library
for
Labyrinth.
backing.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this is like another little nudge, and it's like,
Yeah.
like, obviously that's, I hope that's not it's always weird, because I know that there's always the desire to have some promotion. I'm not ignorant of that fact. You come on here and then it's nice to say, yes, Jess has got this Kickstarter running. We like Jess. The link is in the comments. Go and check it out. But at the same time, I hope that people who are coming to talk are coming primarily because it's a good conversation. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. We need more conversations. It's fun to just talk about things, but it's fun to compare these things and say, oh, this is something that happened in mine. Did it happen in someone else's? Because actually, this last couple of days, works differently for loads of different campaigns. So for the Christmas cards one, there was a huge number of people who backed in the first few hours, but then there wasn't sort of an uptick at the end, because I think most people have been like, oh, well, I got my Christmas cards now, whereas this one, we're seeing much more of an uptick at the end. And I think it's because maybe it's because it's a longer campaign. And so people, say they'd like to be notified at the end. And, we have quite a big remind me later list, 2,000 project followers. So I think actually there's people there who are going, oh, yes, I'd like to come back to this. So, well, let's see, let's see what actually happens. We've still got a day and a half to go.
And let's get to your question in a minute. I also need to plug myself in, my laptop. But Jess, could you talk about what you've been up to over the past day or so?
Ooh, with regards to Library Labyrinth, or just in general? Maybe Library Labyrinth. Library Labyrinth.
Let's start off with in general, and then we'll get to Library Labyrinth later
in general. So I have been thinking about a few other games. One of the ones I've been thinking about has been about different cards. So I've been doing things like, so I've been going onto Facebook and saying, hey, people, what would you like to see on a different card? Because these greeting cards games, really fun, really enjoy doing them. And I'm thinking, okay, roll and color. I feel like roll and color I've got down. I know what I'm doing now. I might do a few other designs, balloons, for example, or flowers, nice coloring in things. But hey, what about some other types of games? So I've been thinking about, and it hasn't got very far yet, but I've been thinking about sort of a maze of some sort, where you've got crossroads. I'm thinking of calling it crossroads cards or something like that. Where you've got crossroads and you, the idea at the moment is that you are chasing something around the maze, something cute. I mean, so it's a little, so it's a dog that's run off with your cookies, for example, that sort of thing.
And so is it a kind of draw a game where it's a single sheet and 2 pencils and that's it?
Yeah, so it's a game. So it's a game where I think at the moment I'm looking at 2 dice, probably 2 dice, this maze full of lots of crossroads. So rather than with a start and an end, it's just lots of crossroads. Maybe you're in the forest or something, and you will need, apart from your 2 dice, you might draw on it, but you might have little pieces instead There'll be something at the bottom with a which is counting up something, so perhaps little circles you fill in and then cross out or something. They'll probably not fill in, because if the dog has run off with your biscuits, then there are only so many biscuits. Basically, the idea is that the counter, which is you, will need to get to the counter, which is the dog, before the dog has finished eating all the biscuits. That's the idea. You want to rescue your biscuits from the dog.
That sounds like a fun little game. And
Yeah.
lots of love, Rob. Have a wonderful day. And
But yeah, so that's what I've been doing recently, and I'm just like, really, this is the stage of throwing ideas around and going, actually, I don't know how this will work, and I've done a couple of things where I was like, oh yes, moving
really
around a maze, rolling dice is fun.
Can I just say that there's almost a taboo about admitting that the project that's on Kickstarter right now isn't the only thing that we're working on. Do you know what I mean? And so it's really nice to hear someone who has a Kickstarter on. And of course, this doesn't diminish any of the love that you have for Library Labyrinth. It just means that, as humans, sometimes we get ideas and we want to work on them, and sometimes we want to do more than one thing at a time.
Absolutely. Yes, I'm not very good at focusing on just one thing at a time. Well, I mean, not unless I get really into it. The other thing I've been doing has very much been Library Labyrinth. So I've been looking at a lot of the details, and I've got a little spreadsheet where I'm trying to work out the shipping, the various shipping costs, because so we are probably using ShipQuest to do this. We've got different prices, of course, for different areas for ShipQuest. So we're trying to even out some of those. For example, the prices for shipping to the United States, they're quite a bit lower than the prices for shipping for Canada. And we're like, well, actually, that doesn't quite seem fair. So basically, we're subsidizing the prices for Canada a little bit so that it's the same as the shipping for the United States, or, well, not quite the same, but it's sort of £1 or £2 more rather than, many pounds more. So that's what. So yes, I've been playing around with spreadsheets a lot. But then the third thing I've been doing really has just been going onto social media and just sharing a whole load of things. But there's only so much you can do there, because otherwise
when you say sharing a whole load of things, you mean things to do with Library Labyrinth?
Things to do with Library Labyrinth. So we have some time-lapse videos, for example, where some of the artwork that Sam has done. I've been sharing some of her time-lapse videos. There's one of the Kraken, there's one of Dracula, which are just really cute little things where it's like, oh, this is how she's drawn it, and they just look, they look fabulous. So I've been sharing a few of those on Twitter and Facebook. Plus going along and sharing some more of the monsters. We got a whole bunch more terrible things. Oh yes, so there's Jekyll and Hyde. There's Anxiety. I really like Anxiety. That's Grendel's mother. Quite like that one. That's Plague. All of the the infectious diseases. I like that one because it's so colourful. But it's like, yeah. And I think we probably have a couple of others in that thing. I think we might have Cerberus somewhere there as well. And but we've also got a video of the Kraken being made somewhere. Oh, Fenrir the wolf. Yes. Yes, definitely need to bind that wolf down. I think that's just so, the colours are lovely there. So yes, sharing some exciting pictures as well, and hoping that kind of sharing some more of the content will point a few more people in the right direction. Oh. And I'm not convinced that I'm not frozen. I might be frozen. I might not be frozen. Who knows? It might be that Bez is frozen. Oh dear.
Looks like, I had some momentary technical issues. I was just hearing you very robotic.
Oh dear.
But I think that my scenes are working now. No, it was definitely me.
Okay.
I do apologize for that. So before we move on, back to Game Found, Die Rolling just says, one thing I like is that it's much easier to late play games or at least easier to find games that you can late pledge for. And
Mm.
yes, absolutely, I think that there's the whole question about, to me, the notion of late pledging is kind of weird, because I understand that you want to then continue to sell copies, but at the same time, like the common trend to go Kickstarter, then pre-release, and then like close it
Mm.
down for a bit and then release. It feels, why not have the pre-release and the Kickstarter at the same time? At least that's how I kind of feel about it. I mean, in a sense, in a way, it kind of makes sense, but then don't you eventually sort of lose the fact that this is like a fun thing and everyone's doing the thing and then it stops? I don't know. I feel, and also I know that I've asked my um, backers in the past, would you prefer to have a pledge manager? Would you prefer me to give you the options of getting extra stuff? And it's been typically slightly in favor of just doing all the surveys and everything on Kickstarter.
Mm.
There have sometimes been one or two people who've said, oh, actually, you know what? If you are saying that via manager, I can.
Ooh. I think we might have lost Bez briefly. We have bits of Bez. In which case, I should say that we're using a pledge manager for Library Labyrinth this time, but this is the first time I've used a pledge manager. Ooh, Bez is still making a few noises. Oops. Yeah, so for the last two games, then we had for the last two things, which were the cards, then we just did it via surveys, exactly as Bez is saying. But the problem is there that you're adding in shipping, and it can get a bit complicated. But certainly for this one, we haven't added in shipping, and it's a bit this is something that's taking up a little bit more space in my head than I wish it was. I think it'll be fine though. So, do we have a Bez back yet? No, I'm not sure we do. I think Bez has frozen. Now, let's see. What were we going to move on to now? Because Bez was suggesting that we should move on to something else, but I'm not 100% sure that was. How about you ask questions in the comments and I'll see if I can answer them until Bez arrives back on the wings of better Wi-Fi. Oh, she's gone altogether. It's entirely me. Okay. In that case, what shall I talk about while I'm doing this? I think I might talk about other things that could go on a card then. So I know that no, hang on. This is the thing about Kickstarters. So therefore, I think we should probably talk more about Kickstarters. So one of the things that I find it's really difficult to do has been to switch off from all the Kickstarter information, because I love the stuff and the data, but you find yourself just, basically, you find yourself just, looking at it and going, I need to refresh it all the time. So I've spent a lot of time refreshing the page and going, okay, right, just one more backer, looking at the data. KickTrack and Backer Tracker have also been my go-to websites. But again, it's really easy to sort of get lost and to go, well, KickTrack is predicting this and Backer Tracker is predicting that. And of course, it's never quite the same number because they're doing it in different ways. Backer Tracker, I must say, has been fairly accurate so far. So, fingers crossed that it's actually going to end up being accurate with the final figure. But it's it's all quite interesting watching that and just getting immersed in all of the data. So Bez is back. Hello, Bez.
Hello, and
Ooh,
we do have a question. Have you already answered this while I was
No,
away?
I haven't. Inspiration for Library Labyrinth. So the first game I did was called Disarm the Base, which was a game which was about breaking into a military base. So it's a peacemaking game. And then I thought, oh, hang on, what should be the next thing that I do? And I had several vague ideas. I was thinking, maybe I should do a game about democracy, but that turned out to be really quite difficult, and you end up with a really, really heavy, lengthy game. But then I was thinking, oh, hang on, maybe I should do a game which is about people helping each other, and particularly women helping each other. And the idea that came to mind was, what if you're somewhere where one woman has to join forces with another to help them out in some way. So I was thinking about people coming out of books. That came really early in it. And the original idea was, okay, what if you've got Lucy from Narnia? She steps out of her book. She has to release somebody else from their book in order to solve a puzzle. So I think it was Lucy from Narnia. And then I was thinking, okay, Joan of Arc. So Lucy from Narnia has to go and rescue or release Joan of Arc, so Joan of Arc can throw a spear or shoot an arrow at something which is through a locked gate in order to release something. I was thinking of sort of a big portcullis type thing. And from that, from that idea, that you've got one person, helping another, one person, using one skill to release another person to use their skill. I was thinking of these sort of combinations or these chains of things, and that basically became Library Labyrinth. So the original,
it's about cooperation and helping each other find stuff, being the essential parts of the team.
Solving a puzzle together.
And to Ian, if you're still here, definitely see at UK Games Expo.
So that original idea stayed very firmly through the game, and that is very similar to what we've got. We've got something where you've got to have two cards together. You've got to combine their skills in order to capture one of these literary monsters and put it back in its book. And that idea as well, that it's fictional and historical characters together, that has stayed with it, the whole time. So I think that actually of that theme, the original inspiration, we really haven't travelled that far from it. We've got all round the houses in terms of, mechanics and how that might work, and whether it was a board or cards, or, whether it was a proper dungeon crawler, and now it's tiles like in Forbidden Island or Forbidden Desert. And so, there's been a lot of change there, but the original idea has really stayed the same. It's got the same core.
But I appreciate that today has been a bit weird with me going off and, us being excited, distracted by Game Found, and, obviously it's the last day of a Kickstarter. You don't expect to have a typical thing, but there we go. We haven't actually talked about brilliant things. What's a little thing which is brilliant? So why is the last day of a Kickstarter a brilliant thing? Why is the ending a brilliant thing? I mean, obviously, without the ending, it would just carry on, and then you'd never get the game made, and that would be kind of a bit rubbish. Because if it never ends, then you can never go to the next thing. So from that perspective, things ending is actually a really good thing, because Kickstarters aren't even about the Kickstarter themselves, really. They're more about what comes afterwards, what comes after the campaign, what comes, the games that you deliver, potentially. But there is a bit of a joy, a bit of an excitement. And I have had, I want to say, 3 campaigns out of 12 that funded on the last day. And that is quite nerve-wracking, and one of them actually funded in the last 2 of them funded in the last 2 hours, but my first ever one funded, I want to say, last 40 minutes, and given that it was a 58-day campaign, but that was because everyone comes together and says, oh, let's do this, let's kind of support it, and there was a real sense of energy and excitement about that. And on social media, people were like, oh, let's get Bez over the finish line, let's support Bez, because Bez really loves games, and there's something lovely about that. But if there's an achievable target where it's like, oh, let's get to 1,000 people, that'll be really cool, and that is something that you can sort of rally behind. And even if you're only backing for like £1, and you've made a real
Yeah,
contribution to that. And there is that
absolutely.
excitement. But is there anything else about the end that you want to say is brilliant?
Well, it is a deadline, and some people really like deadlines. So I think there are two things
Mm-hmm.
here. I mean, firstly, it provides a lot of structure. So exactly as you were saying, Bez. That it's not. That it's part of the greater whole. But supposing there wasn't, that ending, then yeah, it would just fizzle out, I suppose. So it provides that nice structure and saying, right, we're now going to move on to the next stage. This is when it's going to happen,
Mm-hmm.
which I really appreciate. I like having that structure there. But there are also people who are deadline people. So I tend to be a back relatively soon person. When I have something that I like, I tend to, perhaps not first few minutes because I'm not really an early not 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 really an early adopter was what I was going to say, but it got
Mm-hmm.
all muddled up in my mouth. Um, but I don't back at the last minute generally. But there are some people who are real deadline people, and that's just the way they operate. They like to have that that reassurance of a hard deadline, and they're like, right, okay, I will do it by that time. Um, so yeah, I think it's quite nice that it caters for different people there. The people who want to be the first one through the door, and the people who want to be the last one through the
Mm-hmm.
door.
Now, I also let's carry on talking about this, of course. That is
Mm.
the main topic, and if anyone wants to comment, ask questions from like follow, that is of course lovely. But we have blethered on for the better part of an hour, and I feel like it's appropriate to let Jess kind of go and do the stuff. But let's try and tackle the three questions that I fundamentally had. What can you expect? What might you want to do? And how are you feeling? Like, I think
Mm.
we've kind of gone around a lot of these subjects already. But before we get into those three questions, one last thing I want to say. 10 p.m. on Thursday. We did not discuss that, but both of us decided that 10 p.m. on Thursday would be the correct time to end. Why is that
Did
a brilliant time?
mm, did you also go live at 10 a.m.?
I did soon after 10 a.m.
Mm.
because I went live during my show.
Right.
So I started my show and I was like, okay, we're going to go live, and then I showed the screen, and I showed myself clicking the button. So it was like around 10:30ish,
Yeah.
10:15ish, maybe 10:15.
Mm. So I went live at 10 a.m., though it was actually more like 1 minute past or 2 minutes past, because actually I went, it's no, it's nearly 10 a.m. I've got to go and do the thing, and then of course I found something else I wanted to change, and as you do. But 10 p.m. So I think 10 p.m. Firstly, because it nicely mirrors 10 a.m.
Mm-mm.
Secondly, because it's the end of the day, but it's not midnight. So I wanted it to go for the month of March. But I didn't. But I wanted it to be like a sensible thing, and of course, I have to press the button to make it go. So I couldn't sort of, make it go at 1 minute past midnight on the 1st of March. But I
Mm-mm.
also didn't want to stay up until really, really late on the 31st of March. So 10 p.m. nicely mirrors 10 a.m., but it's also a time that I can realistically stay up till and watch those last few things come in and be like, this is exciting. Because I just felt that I would want to be there.
And for the benefit of Michael or anyone else who's popped in just now, we are, as you can see on the bottom, talking about finishing a Kickstarter. Jess is finishing a Kickstarter at 10 p.m. tomorrow. We're just discussing why that time. I
Mm.
went through some similar things. So I was thinking, I want to have a celebration. I want to be present. I want to have a bit
Mm.
of a chat. And I did do a stream for, I want to say, about maybe 80 minutes. I was planning to do it for at least like an hour plus a little bit afterwards to wrap up any questions that and I'd written a list of questions for myself, and if anyone had actually asked me anything, then I would have given those priority, but everyone seemed to like the questions that I asked myself, so I just went through them. I did get to a few folk kind tuning in and congratulating me, which was lovely. It felt, for whatever reason, a bit subdued, and I think that was just because of the sheer number of backers compared to my
Mm.
previous Kickstarter. Again, this is 280. And this is also something that was very much going through my mind,
Mm.
exactly what Michael says right here. 10 p.m. is
Yep.
5 p.m. Eastern time. So like technically it's not Eastern Standard Time anymore, it's Eastern Daylight Time, but no
Yeah,
one
that's
uses
true.
that.
Yep.
So potential US backers can't complain that they didn't have time on the last day. Yes, 100%. I want to make sure it's early enough for me because 10 p.m. If I stay up until 11, if I'm streaming until 11, I am okay with that. Frankly, I think that any day that I've been streaming past 11, I feel a bit tired. Like, yes,
Mm.
I'm quite happy to say anytime that I've been streaming for 24, 25 hours,
Yeah.
I am very tired the next day. But even like if I were to start to stream at 11 and like
Mm.
I've done podcasts at silly times. I've done podcasts
Mm.
at like 2 a.m. because I really had to, because I really wanted to be
Mm.
on Breaking Into Board Games, the podcast. And
Yeah.
they are US based. There's like four of them. So, well, three of them. So I want to kind of meet their timing as well.
Yeah.
But it's me like here. Let's try and do something that we like. And yeah, 10 p.m.
Yeah.
seems like the right time for
Yeah,
whatever reason.
yeah, yeah. There's definitely something about 10 p.m. And I think
Mm-mm-mm.
actually that what Michael was saying about the US time zones as well. Yeah. So it gives people that extra bit where they can be like, right, okay, here's when we're going to do it. Because we do tend to get a fair number of backers overnight. We get
Mm-mm-mm.
the US backers overnight, and then we get the UK backers during the day, and we now have more US backers than UK backers, which wasn't the case for most of the campaign. For most of it, we had more UK backers, and then about 3 days ago, the US overtook the UK there, which is fine. It's just one of the things I was following, and it sort of
I mean,
getting
it
a
is a
burst
much
of
bigger
data.
country,
It is
and
a much
you
bigger
do
country.
actually send it to the US, and your shipping costs aren't that much more as a percentage of the overall cost of what you're
Mm.
getting, if you know what I mean.
Well, the shipping costs, I think, I think the shipping costs are slightly more, but then you don't have to pay the same VAT and customs and the
But
import
you
duty.
But
It's
given
a
that the
different thing.
game's already like a £29 game, so
Yeah,
it's not like a busy bargain bag, where
yeah,
frankly, at a certain point, it was like, yeah, like I put it on my page, and
hmm
you can get a game about wee whimsical creatures and trying to identify them after some mixed noises. And what goes on there is that I've got Vagard, who printed some
mm,
extra copies in near Poland and is shipping them out from Poland
yeah,
on my behalf. And each time he does
brilliant.
that, I get a couple of quid. Vagard gets some money, and
hmm
also I paid for all the initial stock,
hmm
so I lost money on that, and
Yeah,
Vagard didn't lose any money. So it's
yeah,
but yeah, well, hopefully we will both be quids up by the end. That
yeah,
is, of course, the hope, because
mhm,
otherwise, frankly, it would be incredibly sad if, 5 years down the line, it was like, you know what, I would have been financially not even as well off, but better off.
mm,
That's if I'd not. That would always be incredibly sad. And even though money isn't our primary motivator, we do need something to pay for our time, because otherwise
yeah,
there's a real opportunity cost to working on stuff. And now I think post COVID, I'm just really appreciating that I've got finite not only time but also energy each day. There comes a time when all I can do is, yeah, social media I can just about manage. Um, Watching things I can just about manage, and maybe reading something that's quite simple. But
mm,
even there, I might not be able to take everything in if I'm reading. And it just feels like every single day, that's what I feel like I'm going
mm.
through. I've just got half the energy that I had back in November.
and that is that is really frustrating. I mean, that must be just, yeah, because I feel a little bit like that, but not nearly as much as you're describing. And I think actually that's something that, the more people are getting COVID and finding that their energy
Mm-mm.
levels are just dropping for months afterwards, and it's really not good.
Yeah, it is a problematic thing, and I mean, obviously, there's lots to enjoy in life. Not everything that in life has to need energy, but then a lot of things do. And on Saturday, I had a lovely day when someone came over and I said, "Hey, sorry about," and yeah, I'm not going to go personal actually, but there has been a bereavement in the family that I found out about on Friday, um, which I've not shared publicly actually until just now. But I told my friend, it's not someone who was super close to me, but I am upset about it. I spoke to their partner, their widow, I guess, on Friday to offer my condolences. We chatted about memories for 10 minutes. And anyway, the point is, like, obviously, that's also an extra thing that maybe brings me down, changes my mood. But I think that it's just a whole everything together. And then on Saturday, I had someone who was planning to come over, and I said, I would still love you to come over. But just to let you know, my entire home is a mess, and I we went out, we walked to Regent's Park, we walked around. I paid for a pizza that we kind of shared. I think I had like 5 slices, they had 3, but we just had a lovely day together, and we played my role and colouring in game. And
Oh
yeah,
yes, I
that
want to see more about that at
was
some point. Next
oh,
time.
have you
Yeah.
seen, this is the latest treat, this is Ghost or
Ooh.
Tree.
I think that one is a tree.
Yeah, everyone said tree, but the ghost player was a lot younger, and I think not as good at predicting what other people would see, if you know what I mean. But anyway, that is probably, hopefully, going to be ready for external playtesting, like unobserved playtesting within the next 2 weeks. And so if you're ready, then I will probably on Big Cock have like some sort of form, and I'll get Chris to help me with putting everything into data. So we're going to have quantitative analysis of how often each thing wins to try and balance it a little bit, because it is an asymmetric game. So there does need to be a little bit of balancing. But anyway, the point is, all this stuff takes energy, and we need to be mindful of our energy. And I can't remember what the point was. Let's go to the main questions. What can you expect? You can expect an uptick. You can expect more people to jump in. For me, I did not have as much of an uptick as you might think, but I will show my kick track. What do you normally expect for your ending, Jess?
So I think it depends what I've been doing so far. So here I am expecting an uptick. We're starting to see the uptick. But it's also, but it depends whether you've been there, there on the Kickstarter page, replying to lots of comments, and we've been there replying to comments. And I know in yours, Bez, you've also been there replying to loads of comments and talking to people, sort of making it a community, because because having those conversations basically means that when people come in the last day to that page, then they see a vibrant page where the creator is responding, where questions about, box size or, number of cards or, timelines or whatever, where they've all been clarified there. And that makes a real difference, because it gives people that confidence to back, to say, oh, yeah, actually, I would quite like to back this. This looks like something where they're being responsive, where they're talking to people about it.
I mean,
I think that's
saw
what
one extreme example that someone made a lovely idea. I don't know if you know these giant balls that you can actually get into and then you roll around in.
Oh yeah, they look
someone
good
wanted to
and
set up a
scary at the same
league
time.
in London for playing football with one of these giant balls, and so everyone's in one of these balls, and it kind of, they would basically buy this, and then everyone who backs, you could back to kind of be part of a team, and then you would get basically to go in so many times. And I thought that sounds so much fun, like playing loads of games of this. And then, but there wasn't like, I think at the start, maybe it didn't go up as quickly as they had expected, and then they just gave up. But they then didn't even bother replying to everyone. They stopped doing any updates. And I'm sure that if it had carried on, because I know this person personally, they would have absolutely done it. But I think at that point, they just got dejected. And I think that's a really interesting thing about how your emotions can change the Kickstarter, if you know what I mean. Yes,
Yeah, because there is
Zorbs.
something about Zorbs Zorbs, those sound great. You know, because actually that sort of thing, you're not necessarily buying into a product there, you're buying into a community experience. You know, so you need to have the reassurance that that person has the, you know, the community skills, as it were, you know, which I'm sure they do. But they need to show that as well. They don't just need to have that. They need to show that by, you know, replying to people and sort of, you know, keeping upbeat. Certainly for ours, you know, because there was a bit in the middle where we actually posted and said, look, you know, we're both feeling a bit ill because we picked up COVID and aircon, etc. You know, and people were like, oh, that's so sad. You know, but it was that kind of thing where, you know, being open and just telling people, you know, what's happening and, you know, just, you know, talking about how it's going on. Because actually 30 days or 31 days in this case, you know, that's quite a long time for your emotions to be on that roller coaster.
And it's interesting because, what should you expect and what can you do and how do you feel? I'm going to actually answer all three of those questions and from my perspective, from my last campaign. So, what I expected was typically I say, okay, about 1/3 of the backers on the first day, maybe 1/3 of the backers on the last few days, and 1/3 of the backers in the middle. But if you look here, in terms of the raw number of backers, 139 day one, 42 day two, and then it was a very short campaign. It was 9 days, but then we go to the last days, 15 and 21. Now, that means that the last 2 days combined were less. That was 36 backers were less compared to the second day, which is not what I would expect. I would normally expect the last 2 days to not be, and thank you for the support, Adam, lots of love. And whilst the last 2 days, I would expect not to be as big as the first day, but at least as good as the second day, if you know what I mean. And so I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's because it was such a short campaign. I don't know if it was because of the nature of the campaign that the page wasn't looking good. I think that's probably what it is. That particular page, something about it, people who already knew me and trusted me to make something good, those were the early adopters. They were already there right away saying, yeah, we're going to support Bez. But then after that, people who saw the page later on, they maybe weren't convinced that it was going to be an amazing thing. Maybe they were just thinking, oh, I don't know, this sounds a bit similar to quite a few other games, and I'm confused by all these different vegetables. What's going on? And I think that maybe having the multiple graphical variants actually hurts me. And in retrospect, I probably wouldn't have done like all the graphical variants. I probably would have just said, you know what, let's do a reprint of the turnips, and I probably don't need to reprint the beetroots, but let's see how many turnips we reprint, and I won't bother with the radishes until we've actually determined that there's a need for them. Because at this point, how many people are going to get radishes? I don't know. Whereas if it was like a year later where people had already played with the game, and that's the thing, like it's easy to think, oh, I'm not ready for the radishes, I'm excited by the radishes, and there's a bit of, well, I really want it, hopefully other people want it too, but I've been playing this game since September, and like the turnip version came out in December, and I've been playing it a lot, and I have really enjoyed it, and it is exactly the kind of game that I like, but most people have not played it at all. So why do they want a more difficult version? That's probably a terrible marketing move in retrospect. And so I do think that in future, it would be like one Kickstarter, this is the thing that you're getting. And yeah, that's where I feel maybe I dropped the ball a little bit. But that wasn't about the end. Going back to the end, what could I have done? I don't think I could have done much more than I did. Like, I did actually schedule a lot of tweets to say, hey, there's 48 hours left, 24 hours left, 12 hours left, 3 hours left. And I think that was a good thing to do because, especially on Twitter, people see that, and 3 hours later, it's basically irrelevant. So you want to have that final thing to encourage people to share that. And you want to have something on Instagram and Facebook, encourage people to go and back it. But yeah, it does feel like at the same time, what you want to do is probably less than you feel in some senses, at least less than I feel. I don't want to project onto other people, but on day 3 of that Kickstarter, even on day 2, I was feeling, oh, why is it not going up at the rate that I expect? Why is this not happening? And what am I doing wrong? And the truth is, yeah, in retrospect, maybe I did make some mistakes with the entire thing, but should I have cancelled the project? No, that would have been a shitty thing to do. That's my one swear for today. But it would have been like I said, £500 is the goal. And so once you reach your goal, it's kind of like, well, I said that this is enough for me to do the thing. And I do still think it's enough for me to do the thing. And I will be happy once it's all done and once it's all drawn. And while I'm doing my colouring, and I need to remember it doesn't need to be perfect. And now I need to kind of keep that mantra going on in my mind. But while it's going out and there's not enough people, there's where should I be promoting it? Where should I be promoting it? What should I do? And the truth is that, yeah, you need to have those times off. You need to allow yourself to get out, to do other things that aren't just purely about promoting the thing. And so what really happened for me, it basically didn't have much of an uptick. If you look at the final days, 18, 9, 13, 9, 7, 15, 15, 21. So I did get like 3 times as many backers on the final day as I did at the Nadir at 7. So, but it's not a massive increase. And I think that what you should do is, as much as you can comfortably do without sacrificing your own emotions, you do need to self-care. And I think that what you feel is going to be, at least for me, again, I don't want to project, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but what I felt was a sense of disappointment here, a sense of what am I doing wrong? And yeah, honestly, this kind of was my most frustrating. Like, again, this is the weird thing. If all of my Bezzy bargain bags do exactly as well as this, then that will be lovely because they are meant to be a quick thing. But I did think that this would do slightly better because people might want more copies, and I just came away from it thinking, why did it not have that top tick? And so I had a sense of bewilderment, confusion, disappointment.
So there is one thing you need to remember when looking at KickTrack, and that is that the days are not real days as far as we're concerned. They're not on UK time. So, for example, when I've been looking at KickTrack now for Library Labyrinth, then I know that we've taken a certain amount, per today, but that's not reflected in the figures, even though they're up to date, because it's putting some of it in the day before. Because it's now, I assume that it's on New York time or something, for example.
Yeah, I think it is on Eastern time, but also they are still 24-hour slices. So even if you shift like 5 this way or 5 that way, it's still sure that final day might, even if that final day is only 12 hours, it is still broadly a fair representation. The overall shape of the graph is a fair representation.
Yeah, absolutely. But you should probably take a little off the first day and put it on the last day, essentially. But but you're absolutely right. That it is still a fair representation of the graph. But I mean, thing is that sometimes it's okay to feel disappointed. Because you can look at the various different things you've done, and particularly when you've just had a really successful thing. And I think I think you have had some really successful things. Then to have something which is slightly less successful but still pretty successful can feel a little bit like a downer, even though it is a really good game. I think you're probably right about the fact that you were perhaps trying to put too much into it, putting the radishes in too, putting it all in and having, this more complicated version as well. There are some people who just always want the more complicated bits, but I think for some other people that just looks quite confusing.
I explicitly said, I don't want anyone to play the radishes first, at which point it begets the question, why am I offering that first then? I mean, really, the sensible thing to do is when people are getting the thing, then you do the sequel. Like at some point, in theory, around now, maybe even though I've got still some copies of a game about wee whimsical creatures and trying to identify them after some mixed noises, like right now I think I've got let's say 250. It might be slightly wrong, my estimate, but let's say I've got this much. My plan right now is sometime in the future I'm going to sell out, probably if not after UK Games Expo, then maybe after Tabletop Scotland, I don't know.
Yeah.
And once that's happened, then I will do a totally new edition. And then maybe that totally new edition I'll make it so that it's printed elsewhere, but maybe I should actually have a Kickstarter just for the international version to say, hey, let's go back, and yes, I've got about 100 copies left of this international version, but then you also get into the whole Kickstarter is for making new things. But then part of me is also wondering if if the entire Kickstarter business model, especially for me, where I am going through so many projects, whether it's framed wrongly. Because let's be honest, the money from one project, sure, part of that is for the printing costs of itself, but a large part of it is to allow me to make the next thing. And so these aren't really Kickstarters for individual projects. A game about wee whimsical creatures and trying to identify them after some mixed noises allowed me to get Chris on 2 days a week for several months. And at this point, now I am, running on fumes as a company, you might say. But because of that, I was able to do a first edition of a game about quickly grabbing creatures that are totally different, like I would say your turnips, as well as a game about drawing creatures, complementing the drawings and complementing the complements, which actually I need to. I totally forgot. So I was going to get Chris to actually do a totally new version. I need to give them a ring and ask them to focus on that today rather than the Grabble letters if they haven't already started that. But yes, that is the point, that with that, then we have Chris helping me, and also it affords me the opportunity, even if I don't pay myself for my time, but I want to at least be paying other people for the bits that I have no interest in doing and pay them for their time and be able to do that with the previous Kickstarter. And so this is kind of the way that Kickstarter is meant to run, surely, that the Kickstarter isn't just for that one thing, but to helps you make a company, that helps you make future things. And so maybe really what I should be looking at is something more like Button Shy, where they actually have a new game every month. Every month is probably a bit too frequent for my busy bargain bags, but if I say, yes, these are going to come at least every 2 months, be prepared. And if you want something, then you can get it with the following Kickstarter and save money on shipping if you're within the UK. It's not super slim, so it is a large letter. It's not just the standard letter, but yeah, it's £8, and if you believe that all these games are worth making, then you're basically paying the £3 shipping. Well, within that, you get the super secret comic that I don't tell anyone about on the main Kickstarter page, where it's just like meant to be a surprise. Say, oh, I got this little folded A4 comic that was hand folded, and Bez wrote my name on it, and then it's basically thanks everyone for backing the thing and for allowing me to make the thing. And yeah, but do you get what I mean about Kickstarter not being just for that one thing?
Yeah. So you're almost making a series of things, which is what you've explained by saying that it's, that it's the Bezzy bargain bags and it's, number 2 or number 1 or whatever. But it's almost like a subscription model. You sort of almost want to say, well, this is going to cost, this would cost £3 a month, then once a quarter, so every 3 months, you get a thing. That's basically the thing that you're doing. And I think that kind of, that can fit into a Kickstarter model, but you're absolutely right that Kickstarter wasn't set up for that kind of thing. Kickstarter was kind of set up for a one-off type thing rather than something which is an ongoing
I think
series.
That the original inspiration for the Kickstarter was Yanni wanting to make an event, and it was literally, we want to have a concert. Can we do a concert? Can we sell enough tickets to run this one concert? And an event makes so much sense as a Kickstarter. A big makes a lot of sense as a Kickstarter. But once you get into small things, then is it even the right model? But I know your time is precious. It's already 11:11, that magical time with all the ones. So
11:11.
Let's talk about what you predict, what you have experienced with previous Kickstarters, and what you feel like you want to do, what you feel like maybe other people might want to think about doing, what you are thinking of doing. Feel free to ask a question if I can offer any input, and how are you feeling?
So I'm feeling quite good. The thing is that, of course, so one of the questions you were asking before was about, how much of this is kind of within our own control. Well, it is, but the results are so delayed. It's not something where you do something and you see an instant result. It's that the work that we've done over the last year, the work that we've done over the last month, has contributed to how many people are backing now. So you can't really change that much of it. But right now, then I am going to go onto Facebook and to talk about it in various groups, probably today or tomorrow. There are a few other things. I'm probably going to put out a whole load of tweets on Twitter. I've got some drafts for various different times of day to say, right, this is what's happening now, this is what's happening then. Gonna go make an Instagram post, because actually I don't think I've done one for a couple of days, and I definitely need to do that. But also, just making sure that the page looks as good as possible. There are a couple more pictures I put on it last night, so a few more monsters, making sure I reply to all the comments. I think there are 2 more comments in there that have come up over the last hour or so, that I need to quickly give a reply to. But just, making sure that we've got that. The other things, we have around there, making sure we know what's going to happen when it finishes. So we're planning on using GameFound for our pledge manager. So, going to sort of go and make sure that we do that. Maybe swap out that, because we've still got that on there. Some of those. Oh yes, I think the stretch goals are up to date, which is good. Just see if there's anything else there that we want to add in, any other pictures, any other things for that final day. But it's mainly going to be talking to people online and just hanging around Twitter a lot, I think.
And that all seems very reasonable. And I was actually also looking at your daily data, and you haven't seen in terms of pledges or backers, a massive uptick. Like for some reason, after one, basically
So
around
that's a
your second
comment.
week, you had loads of comments here.
That was because we were asking there what the curse should look like. Now
Ah,
we have, so lots of people, gave opinions on what the curse is. Now here, because it's only 11 in the morning, then we're not seeing the uptick today, but we have actually seen it. We've seen it starting yesterday, and it has been carrying on today. So Kicktrack hasn't kind of caught up. So at this point in time, it does make a bit of a difference. Do you want me to share the little graph we've got on the actual Kickstarter page?
sure.
Here, let me share. Share screen.
You
Share
are always
screen.
welcome to share your screens with us, Jess.
Let's see. And this one is going to be, I think it's going to be that one. Yes. So here we go. That's where we are at the moment. And yeah, as you can see, there's that little, there's that graph that comes up here. And in fact, as I go along here, you can see it pop up. So, so at midnight, that's just gone, we had 28,339, and now we've got 29,263. So we've had, so that is starting to be an uptick. Most days we've done, so I think the least we did one day was just over £200, and that's going to be one of these days down here, or perhaps that one there. Oh no, perhaps that one there. Yeah, that's that's 198, I believe, there. But then of course we've done 900 and.
Can I ask, how much does the pledge per person vary? I mean, of course, you've got some people who are backing for just £1, and you've got some super backer. I don't not
No,
like
we do
some
have some
whales,
people
to
who
use
have
the
booked
term,
quite a lot.
who are just like, okay, I really want to support Jess for a large amount.
We've had so there are a few people, 7 people, I believe, who have backed for 3 copies of the game, which is £87. Yes, it's £87, and I believe that one of them did add on a bag as well. We've also had a couple of people who have backed for the all-in pledge, so that includes a bag. But because there are 2 different bags, they've added an extra bag, so they want both bags. Not surprisingly, people who like books really, really like tote bags as well, which has not surprised us at all, because it's the sort of thing that does very well in bookshops. But this bit here that says 31 pounds and 43 pence, that has not changed very much. It was, I believe, at 30 something at one point, and it was, I believe, at 32 something at one point. But it's literally been within those, within those £2, within that £2 range is what it's been the entire time.
Interesting. Like, just for comparison, I mean, you'll be probably unsurprised to know that a game about wee whimsical creatures and trying to identify the monster who makes noises was £6.67, I want to say, average.
Okay.
And my more recent game about quickly grabbing creatures that's totally different and counting your vegetables was £8.67.
Okay.
But I had a fair number of people backing for £1. Within the UK, I expect most people to back for the £8 to get the game. I think that I did definitely underestimate the number of people who would be into print and play. And I think that maybe for this, because it is, you don't need to do any cutting at all, I think more people will be willing to back that for £1. But for something where you actually need to cut and make cards, that is a bit of a bigger ask. And,
it is. Some people like it, some people don't. So, yeah.
Yeah. And for me, it was really fascinating what a low percentage it was. I thought, yeah, I'm going to, hopefully, I'll keep on doing that for the next couple of things, but I'll kind of maybe at some point reconsider, is it worth keeping spending as much time as I'm spending on these things? Is it worth? But so you've talked about what you're expecting. We've seen the graph, but who knows? And maybe next time we'll talk about what's actually panned out. But how are you feeling? And do you have anything left to say?
I'm feeling quite good. There was something I wanted to say which was not related to this, but something else, which is that, of course, you're colouring in things. When I was doing the roll and colour cards, then I actually had a version where I'd shrunk all of this. No, did I shrink? No, I expanded it slightly so it fitted onto a letter size sheet of paper as well as A4, and that went down really well with US backers. Because, of course, if you're just printing a sheet of paper, then it's so useful to be able to choose between which sheet of paper you're printing. So although letter and A4 are not that different, when you've cut them in half, then they suddenly look quite different, actually, because the proportions are completely different. So anyway, that was
that makes lots of sense. So make sure to do the letter size.
Letter as well, yeah. But yeah, I am feeling pretty good. I mean, basically, supposing that we got absolutely no more backers, so we're at 931 backers. Supposing we got no more backers and no more money, then I'd be a bit like, oh, well, that's that would be a bit disappointing.
You're at 932.
Oh, hey! I need to refresh.
So actually, currently, if you got exactly 2 backers per hour now, you would be bang on 1,000. And this is the first time that we've been able to say that since the show started. That you are accelerating.
Excellent. We are. Well, I mean, we have. In fact, that is 900 and. What's 39 minus 7? 32. That's 900 and no, it's minus 32. Anyway, 968. So it's not. So basically, since midnight, we have had 968 pounds pledged. Normally, at this stage in the day, we have about 200. Maybe a little bit more, maybe 250 pledged. So that's a really good sign. Hopefully that uptick will continue and become a proper uptick. But we're looking quite hopeful. Basically, getting to 30,000 would be great. Getting to 1,000 backers would be great. Basically, those are my two nice round numbers.
Like none of these really matter. I mean, in the big scheme of things, it'll be a little bit disappointing, but there's a human compulsion to be like, yay, 1,000, or yay,
next big number.
Like, it's a big round number. Like, it's not going to affect your finances, let's be honest, at this point, whether you're £300 less than it. It's not like these things. Yeah,
absolutely.
It's weird because stretch goals almost feed into this compulsion for big round numbers, well,
I have found that the stretch goals. So I'm not convinced by the stretch goals to really help people pledge. But I did find that having some stretch goals was extremely useful in order to structure what social media things we were going to talk about. So it was a really good way to sort of to say, oh yes, well this means that we'll put out an update tomorrow instead of today. Meant that the updates were quite evenly spaced. Because it basically gave us a framework to hang things off, and it gave us something more to talk about on social media. So the point of the stretch goals wasn't so much to get more money, although obviously that was nice, but it was just to provide a nice sort of timetable and framework, which I hadn't quite realised beforehand.
Gives you a secondary way of indirectly getting more money.
Absolutely. Yes, and it just means that you've got something a bit more to talk about. So I'm a fan of stretch goals because of that, but I think they need to be managed quite carefully, because they can just be hey, why don't you all back more? Which is not the point of it. We want lots of people. We want people to share it,
And
not people
even
to
if
put in
you're
more money.
doing, but even if your stretch goals are tied to the number of backers, like even saying, hey, we need to get 68 backers more for this next stretch goal,
Yeah,
everyone go and share with your friends. Even that can feel a little bit, I don't know, um,
needy.
manipulate, needy, yeah.
Mm.
I was going to say manipulative, but that sounds a little bit too far. But
Yeah.
there's something not, yeah. I mean, obviously, you want people to share it, but ideally, you want people to share it because they believe in it, because they feel like it's worth sharing, like it's
Mm.
a really good thing, not just because they particularly want to get this extra free
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's see what happens anyway.
Yeah, fingers crossed. That sounds really exciting. And so, um, if you've got any questions for us, Jess, then feel free to ask. Otherwise, I'm going to ask question of the day. Question of the day. Here's a little question before you go on your way. When's the last time you went into a library? Do you have a local library? You don't have to tell me what your
Ooh.
local library is, but when was the last time you went into a library? I think I went into a library, I want to say, on maybe Thursday last week. I've actually, since I came here, I've not been to the local library at all until about
Oh,
2 weeks ago. And then I went to the local library while my Kickstarter was running. I needed some time off. I had a walk around. Then I went around the park. I saw the sun setting. I wasn't quite done with my day off. When I say a day off, I mean like a few hours off,
mm.
to be honest. But then I went to the library and I was like, oh, it's about 6 o'clock. They close at 7. Well, I'll start reading a comic. I read through 1.5 comic books, and then I got chucked out. I
They were
not
closing.
physically rejected. I was
Yeah.
reminded that they were shutting, and so I kind of finished the page that I was on and put it to the side. But yes, I have enjoyed sitting down in my library and reading comics within the past couple of weeks. How
Yeah.
about you, Jen? How about everyone else?
So it's certainly within the last month, but it was before aircon. So the most convenient time for us to go to the library is Tuesday afternoons. And I didn't go yesterday, and I didn't go the week before. And the week before that, I think I was ill. So I think, but it probably was the week before that. So we don't go every week, but we do go. The kids get a huge number of books, while I get to sort of, potter around and see what's going on. And there's a big play thing for them to climb on and lots of cushions. And so it's all great fun.
Have to admit, I love not real children, but like I do love simple books sometimes,
Mm,
just because when you can sit down and read something in 40 minutes, especially with
yeah.
like a light comic book. I just enjoy that, and I enjoy the
Mm,
visual stimulation. I like the marriage of text and pictures, and it
mm,
tells me a story. I still need to use my imagination to figure out like the intonation and the dynamic between these characters and what's going on. But I feel like it's a lot more approachable and achievable. Whereas a book, it's been a long time since I've actually finished a proper book in one sitting.
mm.
I think that the last
Oh,
time I read a proper, you know, adult book in one sitting was what a Dan Brown novel that I borrowed from somewhere, which isn't like the exactly highbrow stuff.
sometimes you need
It's like
something like that, though.
like it was because I was completely on holiday. Then I started reading it, and I read it for a couple of hours, and then I fell it, and then I went to bed. I got up, I carried on reading, and so I still consider it one
Mm,
sitting because apart from a bit of sleep, that was what I was doing. And being able to take an entire day during a holiday, yes, it's a
just
luxury to read a book like that. But
mm,
when you only have 1 hour to read a book and you can still read it because it's a comic
mm.
book or because it's a simple children's book or because it's I do actually love books that are aimed at children sometimes.
there are some really good books which are for slightly older children, but the sort of the young teenager books, and some of them are really short, and some of them are great. World Book Day often has a couple of them, which are in the which are at the bottom of the World Book Day piles, and they're for older children, but they're really quite short. And I think last year there was one which was a murder mystery, and it was a really good murder mystery. It was really good, but it was,
Real
but it
skill
only took me
in
about half an hour to read.
learning about like distilling everything down and getting rid of everything you can. I actually, on Friday after playtest, I wandered around the valley to somewhere where we might go for this week, and then there was a book sale and there was a children's book. I picked it up, I read the entire thing. It was, I think it might have taken me about a minute. It wasn't that many. It was one of these things where there's one sentence on every two
Yeah,
pages, if you know what I mean.
yeah.
And it was like a delightful story about someone being caught stealing, and then
Oh
they're trying to
no,
make
what
up
happened?
these excuses, and then they're like, "Oh, actually, yeah, I was stealing," and then that's the punchline where the person's like, "Oh, well, why do you have all these I think it was actually turnips or radishes, and I think that's the reason why I picked it up." And then he said, "Oh, because I was holding on to them because the wind was so strong and it blew. I was worried it would blow me away, so I was holding on to them. But then they picked up with me and said, 'Well, why do you have so many?' And they said, 'Well, because I was pulling up turnip after turnip, trying to not be blown away. Why are they in your bag?' Well, that was my one mistake. Yes."
Oh
And
no.
that's like a memorable story that benefited my life. Anyway, over
See,
to you.
that is the thing. You can have some lovely books like that. So yeah,
Exactly. And the hungry caterpillar. I mean, who can
it's a good
forget
book.
the artwork in that? And the moral of
Exactly.
the story is sometimes you want to eat a lot, and that's okay.
You'll turn into a beautiful butterfly at the end.
Like humans and caterpillars work different. But anyway, over to you. What you're up to, you can share buttonly if you want to. I am going to, yeah, def- I'm going to have a quick chat with Chris about compliments and stuff. Maybe doing a second edition, completely different to the one that I've still got like 20 copies of, but see what we can do in a reasonable timescale. There's also a question of maybe, because this is again the sad thing, that's if you want to run a Kickstarter, you need all the art. So if I wanted to be honest about it and make a project fund itself, I should start off, say, okay, we are going to do this. Now Chris is going to do this based on how good the project is. But the truth is, it's going to be done right now in order for it to fund more. Because if I don't have that art, the nice arts at the start, it's not going to fund at all. That is the situation. I'm going to talk with Chris about that. I'm going to do a bunch of writing for an RPG that needs to be finished by the end of tomorrow. I will write a quick message, ask about where we're meeting on Friday, just to sort out the daytime playtest on Friday, and I'm going to make sure that I get out. That's pretty much me. What are you up to, Jess? I assume there's a lot of Kickstarter-related stuff.
I'm mainly going to be looking at Kickstarter related stuff. I'm going to be doing lots of social media stuff. I am going to be investigating GameFound's Pledge Manager services to see, whether that works. Well, clearly it works, but see whether it works for us. But I am also hoping to be drawing a few more little mazes and sort of doing some rolling dice and seeing whether this whole dog running away with cookies or whatever it's going to be, model works. Because it's something which has sort of, caught my attention. I'm like, right, I'm going to do it now. Going to see whether there's something really there.
So that is your distraction for when the Kickstarter is too much and you need a break from the Kickstarter.
Well, exactly. You need at least two things to do most of the time because it just gets too much otherwise. So
I know exactly what you mean.
Yep.
So we've talked, to recap and wrap up before we finish up, I talked about GameFound coming live, but then about 64% of my Kickstarter backers coming from Kickstarter itself, which is exactly the number that Jess had. And I would be actually interested to look at my previous couple of things as well to compare them. But right now, I'm feeling like GameFound probably is not something that I want to embark on. I don't think it's right for the busy bargain bags. That's what I'm currently feeling. We talked about making new games with dogs running through mazes and having fun, doing multiple things at once. Jess talked about the inspiration of Library Labyrinth, about people working together. Joan of Arc with what was the original? Lucy
from Narnia.
Lucy from Narnia. That was the original one. We talked about the end, giving you a structure, giving you the deadline, giving you the excitement, and of course, because it ends, then you can start working on the next thing, and that means actually getting the game to the backers. We talked about Compliments version 2, we talked about books, we talked about how we're feeling, we talked about sometimes there's an uptick, sometimes there's not, and Jess made a really good point. I love this point that you made, where talking about personal accountability and responsibility, said it is down to you, but it's kind of a lot of it's down to things that you did in the past. And I think that's the truth, that we need to be constantly thinking about what we're doing 3 months from now. And if we're not, we are really dropping the ball. And so that is the ideal way to do these things. If you want to check me out, I am Stuff by Bez everywhere, and you can check out my stream schedule here. Tomorrow, I will probably just talk very briefly about this RPG that I'm making and talk out loud and maybe do a little bit of analysis of what I've got so far. Either it will be finished or it won't, but it's not proprietary information. And, the way that LARPs work is that there's no money involved, so it's not like I'm going to sell it or anything. Frankly, once it's done, I'll probably, once I get an itch account, which I would like to at some point in the future, then I'll probably just put it there for free and let's say, name your own price, something like that. Friday is the 1st of April. I normally have a super quick 5-minute show on Fridays. And Saturday, Sunday, I'll be at Now Play This. I will be taking part in a game jam. I will be focusing on that for most of the next week and Now Play This. For now, spread the word. But if you want to spread the word of Jessica Metheringham, Jess, where do you like to be found?
Normally on Twitter. Twitter is where you can find me most quickly and most often. So go to Descent Games. That's the handle on Twitter. But you could also look up Library Labyrinth. The website is librarylabyrinth.com. That has various links to other things, including the Kickstarter. Facebook, we are Descent Games. There's a community, which is Library Labyrinth, but if you go to the Descent Games page, then it will direct you to all sorts of locations and things, I'm sure, there. But yeah, that is where to find me. Mainly Twitter. We are on Instagram as well, but, I don't do that much on Instagram, to be honest.
Thank you very much, everyone who's popped along. And thank you to those who came over and then have had to head off and go on with their day. It's been delightful, and thank you to those who are still here. Thank you, of course, mainly to Jess for this lovely conversation.
Thank you.
There is only one thing left to say at this point, unless you have any final words. Bye, bye. Bye, bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. And bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye-bye, everyone. Oh, you're muted, Jess?
I don't think so.
I thought you were saying bye, but then you just mouthed it. Sorry.
I think I just mouthed it. Bye!
Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.